Hi, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of I Never Knew, But My Dog Did podcast. I am Maureen Scanlon, or Life Coach Maureen, as most of you know me. I am, as always, thrilled to have my next guest. And we were just joking off line that her name is so cool that I had to bring some coolness to try to be in my little bohemian theme today. So, I can't be as cool as she is, especially with her beautiful hair. Wait till you see her if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, if you're on audio, you need to go to YouTube so you can see her beautiful face. So I'm so thrilled to be here with everyone. I'm so happy that you're all tuning in. We're growing, we're getting bigger, expanding this community, helping each other, giving each other resources, which is really what I love. And my next guest is so talented. I'm just in awe of the things that she has accomplished. So, Eva Moon is an author, a humorist, a songwriter, a playwright, a screenwriter, performer, and former Huffington Post blogger. Her plays and musicals have been staged across the US and UK, and her solo musical show, The Mutant Diaries, Unzipping My Jeans, love it, and that's jeans, Genes, is streaming on Amazon. Her screenplay, House Odds, was a Page Awards finalist and was optioned. She's released 5 music CDs, and her music has appeared in feature film soundtracks. I mean, hello, we have so much talent among us. So, without any further hesitation, welcome, Miss Eva Moon. How are you?
Thank you, Maureen. I'm fine. I'm great. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm glad that your blouse matches my hair.
It totally does. I did that on purpose. No, I didn't. I
You
didn't.
got the memo.
Exactly. Actually, I think it was purple in the memo, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no,
So,
I just recently changed my I've had purple hair for years. Um, but my younger child is getting married next month, and so I decided to change it up to the something that would go better with the wedding colors. So I've got it's aquamarine
it's
today.
gorgeous. I love it. It's conforming without really conforming. It's
Yeah.
like I'll look as presentable as I want to. So, I really, really love that. So just welcome. And the first thing we always do on I Never Knew is kind of figure out what is your story? What is your knee story? What was that moment in your life that you thought, oh, this is really bad and I don't know if I can come out of this? So tell us, what's your knee story?
Yeah, I had a pretty big one. It was about 10 years ago. I learned that I carry a genetic mutation, the BRCA1 mutation, and that brings a 87% chance of breast cancer and a 55% chance of ovarian cancer. And at the time, my mother was dying of cancer from the same mutation. I inherited it from her, and only found out because of our family history and her um, cancer. They tested her for the mutation, and she tested positive. So my sisters and I immediately got tested, and they both tested negative, thank goodness. And I tested positive. And of the three of us, I was probably the best one to test positive because I love attention and I got a lot of it. Um, at, at the time, though, it was a real gut punch. The doctors wanted me to have preventive surgeries immediately because I was already in my 50s, and the risk, I mean, I should have had cancer already. And I could have had cancer even, I've known people that learned that they had the mutation, went to get a preventive mastectomy, and in the surgery they found cancer
Wow. I mean, how
already
does
there.
something like that hit you as far as like what goes through your mind? Like what do I do? Or how do you make those decisions? And I'm sure I'm not anti-medical community, but I am pro homeopathic,
Mhm.
naturopathic. So how did that hit you and how did you make decisions?
I mean, with an 87% chance of breast cancer, um, and watching my mother who was dying of cancer, um, I felt like my breasts were booby trapped, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um, just about to go off, and it certainly made that decision a little easier in terms of just going forward with a preventive surgery. Like, you ask yourself, like, I had friends who couldn't understand what I was doing, and they'd say, well, you don't know if you're going to get cancer. There's still a 13% chance you won't ever have to deal with it. And I'm thinking, well, would you fly on an airline that had a 13% rate of not crashing?
Awesome. Right. That's very
Yeah.
true. If we're looking at odds here, that's
But
very
that's not to say it was easy,
yeah.
because I loved my breasts. They were a source of great pleasure to me and my husband, and they had nursed two children, and they were a big part of my identity. My body is a big part of my identity as a woman. And they wanted to take, I mean, I was grateful they let me keep my vagina. It's just,
Don't take everything, just leave
won't take
something.
everything, leave me something. um and and it wasn't even just for my own personal identity, but I also had a stage persona. I was a performer. I was singing like a cabaret singer style music, and a lot of that is kind of sexy and flirtatious. And I'm at the piano and draping myself all over things, um, and to think of going from that sort of attractive, flirtatious female to being mastectomy girl, was just something that was, I couldn't face it. And then I thought, well, that's it. I'm just gonna quit and find something else to do. And I won't, I don't want to, go forward with, and, with, in dealing with my mother and everything. I sort of clammed up creatively. I couldn't write anything. I couldn't perform. I couldn't, I, I didn't write a word during that whole, lead up. Um, and I thought that was it. I didn't know what I was going to do. Um,
That's
but then,
yeah, that's very pertinent. That identity piece of it, not only just as a woman, but as someone who is in the public eye and performing. So I love that perspective. I'm sorry to
and
interrupt you.
oh yeah, and I had a friend who was going through a transition from male to female, and so we had a lot of talks. I had a lot of talks with her about, how do you know that you're a woman?
Oh, good
And
one.
how do you what are the sort of minimum requirements? And I think we decided that, well, if I was a head in a glass jar with no body at all, I would still, I mean, if I was a a data bank in a room somewhere, I think I would still know that I would know what my gender was. And I think that's something
Wow.
that's so innate, whether, whatever your body is.
I
Uh,
really love that. I really, really love that. And I think there's also an energetic piece of that too, where we have, stronger male energy or stronger female energy. It's just that in human form, it's so black and white, isn't it?
well, it's less so now than it was a few years ago, isn't it? And I have my younger child, the one who's getting married next month, is non-binary.
Ah, see,
And
I
so we've
love
had a
that.
lot of conversations about, well, how do you know you're not, I mean, I'm, of course, very accepting of my non-binary child, but I'm also curious, what does that feel like? And they
Yeah.
said, well, I feel like I'm maybe 30% male and maybe 15% female and the rest other. And I'm not
Wow.
sure what that means exactly in terms of how they feel,
Yeah.
but it gives you more of a sense that gender and identity are across a spectrum.
Oh, wow. That's so fascinating. I've never heard it put that way. Oh, wow. I'm in awe. And it's kind of like the rest of it, it's just neutral and the gender part it doesn't matter. And I love that because really in the big spectrum, what matters is who you are at the core, right? And did you
Right.
once you had that surgery, did you feel or were you able to get to that place where it was like, okay, this is not who I am. My boobs are not who I am. And I'm still creative and I'm still beautiful and I'm still
You know,
me.
that was a journey that I can tell you something a little bit more about.
Yeah.
I um I identify very strongly as female, that's my gender. Um and when I was in the process of trying to come to grips with this and trying to schedule surgeries and bursting into tears every 15 minutes, my husband was having a hard time understanding why I was so emotional, why and what, uh, you know, I mean, he knew it was a big deal, but breasts, I didn't need them to live. I didn't need I was done with my uterus, you know, um, and it was a big deal, but it wasn't like the end of the world. And so in the end, I wrote a song to explain to him because that's kind of how I cope with emotion. And so I wrote this song called "Where Are You Now, My Dancing Girl," and it was about the loss of me, that I was afraid, that where was this person going to be when I and who was I going to be after this was all over? Was I going to even know her anymore, the old me? And I played it for him, and then it was his turn to burst into tears. And
Right.
that was kind of a turning point, because then he understood what I was feeling. He could hear my emotion, whereas if I'm being just emotional, it was harder for him to get sense out of it. And then later, when I had the surgery, I had my hysterectomy within 3 weeks of learning that I was BRCA1 positive. They couldn't wait to get me in,
Wow.
and um, that was and we were still performing. I did a played a New Year's Eve gig a month after my hysterectomy. The best part was I didn't have to carry any of the gear, but
There you go. There's a positive right there, right?
and so after that I wrote another then I a couple that was New Year's, let's see, it was December, and then in at the beginning of February I had my mastectomy. um and so it was very quick.
Yeah.
Everything happened really fast, and I wrote, but when you go through something, when you go through surgery and hospitals and all, there's always kind of funny things that happen, the little mix-ups, um, and there's an element of absurdity about going through something like that, and the indignity of the um, preps, and the my cat trying to walk on my tummy when I had stitches, and uh, I so I wrote another song, more in a more humorous vein, called "Ta Ta Tatas," and that was about it was actually sort of the story of discovering that I needed to have this surgery, and then the things that sort of all the indignities that I went through, and just sort of letting it go. And I played that song for, well, I have a mentor, a very dear friend who's encouraged me as an artist for many years. And she was living in Arizona, near just outside of Phoenix. I don't know where you were in Arizona. Um, but I called her up and I played her those two songs, the sad one and the funny one. And she said, "Oh, Eva, you should write a show."
Yes.
And I said, "Not a chance. It's just I don't want to, lay out the this whole thing and be medical when I've been something else for so long. I can't do it. Not a chance." But it kept working at me, and so I started writing some stuff down, and I started messing around, and like the floodgates opened. And a week later, I had a rough draft of this show that was like an hour long with 9 original songs in it. And obviously it needed to happen because
Wow.
it just sort of flooded out. Um so I and it gave me something to do. I was putting this thing together and refining, how do I want to tell the story. I wanted to, acknowledge the sad parts, but I also wanted to give a sense of some of the absurdity and the ridiculousness, and also the hopefulness that I came through this, and I didn't have cancer. And so and I survived, and I was okay. So I wanted to give that side of the story too, that you're going through whatever you're going through, whether it's something like this or some other trauma, um, there is an after most of the time, not all the time. Honest, I there's very sad stories out there, but I was very lucky.
I just
And
love everything about that about you because, well, first of all, being as talented as you are before all of this transpired, I mean, humor is a coping mechanism. And I think humor, of course, it evokes healthy happiness chemicals and endorphins. And because it's a part of who you are from the beginning, whether, anything that transpired. And I love that you didn't lose it. And I love that you embraced it and realized this has to come out, and the appreciation that people will have for it. I'm reminded of a play I had gone to in Phoenix called The Vagina Monologues.
I've seen it,
um
yeah.
yeah, and I love that. And when you were saying that you did that, so I thought, oh, I would see that in a heartbeat, because it is making light of some of the things that we go through, and we can all relate to it. And you didn't want to stay in that place of feel bad for me. You said, I look at the good thing. I did this to live, and I'm going to live. Do you feel like that's how it kind of, the other side of it came out for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was like, going through a tornado and then waking up in Oz.
Right?
Whew,
You were
I didn't
spit
crash.
out. Right.
But it's an opportunity to connect with other people. And that made a huge difference. When I was first starting to go through the process, I found a website. At the time, 10 years ago, there weren't like a million groups on Facebook. There are now for people with this mutation. There's, a dozen different groups that they can support, groups that they can join. But there was this one on this website for this organization called FORCE, which stands for Facing Our Risk of Cancer Empowered.
Wow.
And they had a forum, and so I started participating because I had a million questions. And then after my hysterectomy and my trying to keep my cat from walking on my tummy, I wrote a limerick about uh, about recovering from a hysterectomy. It's just a silly little poem about my cat. And I thought, should I post this on the forum? Are people going to think I'm making light of something serious? But I went ahead and I did it. I said, I'm not trying to make light, you just got to laugh. And oh my God, the outpouring of poetry that came from this, by the time things started slowing down, I think 300 women had written limericks and humorous poems about
Wow.
their, losing relatives, and not, they weren't all humorous. Some of them, of course, are heartrending,
Yeah.
but those needed to come out too. So I saw, I realized that something like this was a point of connection with
Oh,
people.
definitely. The whole reason that I do the podcast is that right there is
Yeah.
that people can be vulnerable and be honest and brave enough to tell their story, because all the people that are listening are just waiting for someone to say something that they can go, oh my gosh, somebody else feels the way that I do. And I've said, I why I do what I do is to be the voice my younger self needed, because um being an over nifty 50, we did not have internet. Well, we did, we had the dial up, but we didn't have, like you said, forums. We didn't have this instantaneous ability to get support, and if you didn't have
Hmm.
a family that supported you or friends, and it was very isolating, and I felt very alone because I didn't have anyone I could share this stuff with. Had I had that, my trajectory would have been much different, but it wouldn't have brought me here. You said
Hmm.
something in your questionnaire that I absolutely love, listeners, and I want you to hear what she said. And I think this is one of the most poignant ways of answering this question on the questionnaire that I've ever had. And we're on episode 97 now. I ask, what is the one thing you never knew that you know now and can help others experiencing the same struggles? And Eva's response is, I don't think anyone knows how they'll cope with trauma before they experience it. I thought I would never be the same person again, and I'm not. But the thing I never knew is how much I would like this new me and how much life would change for the better. I thought being a mutant was a curse, but I discovered it was a gift, and I'm grateful. I just love that so, 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 so much. It's your humor comes out in everything, and you have a very dry humor, and I love it because I ask you questions, and then when you come back, I feel so silly because it's like I feel like it's thanks, Captain Obvious. So the way
Sorry.
that the way that you respond is so it's a craft. It is a gift and a talent that not everybody has. So that's what you never knew. Now, how long was that journey to, and were there any negative experiences that you were able to, well, obviously you were able to, here you are, but what were some of the negative points where you thought, oh man, I don't know if this is what I want to do, or just dealing with any, maybe I'm losing my words here, any people that had a negative response to what you were going through, or people who were judgmental? Did you experience any of that?
Yes, there were, and it was not so much at the time. Um, I my circle of friends were very supportive. It was a year later. Angelina Jolie announced that she carried the BRCA1 mutation and had elected to have a preventive double mastectomy. And that was a year after mine. And because she's such a big star, there was a huge outpouring of just like, what the hell, from the world. People were saying the most horrible things. Oh, if she had brain cancer, would she cut off her head? And
Yeah.
and they just, they just couldn't imagine why someone would make a decision like that. And that's when I actually started writing for Huffington Post. I wrote a response essay about Angelina Jolie, trying to explain. And and I sent it to them, and they brought me on to write. I did a column for a long time called Ask the Mutant. And I wrote about a lot of things, but I wrote a lot about this issue. And it gave me a platform to be able to talk to people, and I had the, satisfaction of being able to convince some people who had made very negative comments to change their opinion with some understanding of the truth about the risks that people with this mutation are facing. And why would someone choose to remove healthy body parts?
Yeah.
um yeah, no, I
I
always,
mean, that's
yeah.
that's and you're right. The thing I noticed about us as humans is, people react rather than learn to respond. So I think you're absolutely right. Being able to give a forum where people understand more about it. And that's just responding out of fear. People fear what they don't know. And you gave it a voice of here's the reason, here's the why. Um, so if there were someone listening today, in my own family, I have a family history of breast cancer. On my mother's side, and they do say that your mother's side is the one that's most concerning. Your OBGYN will ask about your history, and they'll ask to do the genetic testing. If there's someone out there today who has that history and hasn't had that test, how much would you suggest that they do that?
Okay, well, first of all, you can inherit the genetic mutation from either your father or your mother equally.
See, now my experience was the gynecologist always said it really they only cared about your mother's side, because my father's side we had it too, but they would say, well, we don't, that the
No,
paternal side.
that's absolutely wrong information. I'm sorry to
No, don't be
contradict
sorry.
your gynecologist.
Don't be sorry. We need
Genetics,
this.
I mean, men are much less likely to get breast cancer than women are, usually. But men can inherit the BRCA1 mutation equally. And it gives them, and it gives men a 20% chance of breast cancer, whereas it's a very tiny percent if they don't have the mutation. So men with the mutation should be aware that they should be, doing breast checks. And they also have an increased chance of prostate cancer with the
Oh.
mutation. So the risks, I mean, the risks from the mutation are greater, vastly greater for women, but it can be passed on from either the father or the mother. Now, most the breast cancers are not genetically based. They're just other factors, cell degradation and randomness, um, aging. I mean, there's lots of different things, lifestyle. I don't know how much that affects it, but probably to some extent it affects it. The most breast cancers are not genetically based. So you
Oh.
can't just, you have to look at if there's a family history of early breast cancer, that would be a sign to talk to your um, gynecologist about perhaps looking at talking to getting a referral to a genetic counselor to assess your risk and see if you need to have a test. If your family origin, the rate of BRCA mutations is vastly higher among people who are Jews from Eastern Europe, the Ashkenazi.
Okay.
And that's what my background is. I did 23andMe, and my my pie chart is just a circle. It's 100% Ashkenazi Jew.
Wow.
Uh, so that increased my rate from like 1 in 400 to 1 in 40 or something like that. So they look at that kind of family history.
That
And
is.
there's other mutations now that they're discovering, more recently, that relate to to increase risks for breast cancer or colon cancer or stomach, like all different kinds of cancers. There's a lot of development going on now, and continuing to discover more genetic or origins that they can test for. But I would start by, if you have a history of breast cancer, especially at an early age, like, in your 50s or in their 50s, a family member, um, talk to your doctor, and perhaps get a referral to a genetic counselor for a risk assessment. And the first step would not be getting tested. The first step would be filling out an assessment.
Yeah,
And then
that's
depending on the results of the assessment, then you can have the test. And it's just a simple test.
yeah, that's great information. I did not know that it wasn't just genetic. I mean, well, I mean, I guess that does make sense, but they're always saying, when you go to the doctor and you got those questionnaires, everything is the family, 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 family. So that's really, I mean, obviously there's lifestyle stuff too, alcoholism, smoking, all that good stuff. So I love that, and that there's also now these ties to prostate cancer and ovarian cancer. Um, so they do say that hormone replacement therapy is not recommended if you do have, say, a genetic disposition for breast cancer. Do you know anything about that?
I have very mixed feelings about that. Well, first of all, a, a lot of breast cancers, especially the non-genetically induced ones, um, are what they call hormone sensitive.
Mm.
So there's some that are estrogen sensitive, and there's some, there's like three different major hormones that are connected with that breast cancers can be sensitive for. And if you have an estrogen, if you had breast cancer and it was an estrogen sensitive breast cancer, then you would be put on drugs going forward that would suppress estrogen.
Mm.
Um,
Okay.
but in for the genetic breast cancers, especially the BRCA ones, they're what they call triple negative, which means that they are not hormone sensitive. Um, which is, not good news, because there's nothing you can do
Yeah.
in terms of therapies. There's really nothing you can do besides super vigilance and removal of the breasts to prevent it. That I couldn't go on hormone suppression to reduce my chances of breast cancer. And with triple negative breast cancer, it's frequently it's metastasized before it's detectable in the mammogram. So even just
Wow.
having, frequent mammograms isn't enough.
Yeah. Wow.
Uh, so you have to have, ultrasounds and cat MRIs, and
Yeah.
much more invasive and expensive testing to monitor. Now, some women do choose to monitor, especially if they're younger and they still want to have children and nurse them. They don't want to have the surgeries while they're still in their childbearing years. For me, I was, past, I was done having children. So it made more sense for me to just not have to worry about having that sword hanging over my head every 3 months.
Oh my
You know,
gosh, yes, and doing all those yearlies and wow. And I when I hear what you are saying, I mean, I think that was an amazing decision that you made and yeah, it's almost like once you get the facts, then it's a lot easier to have the ability to make those decisions. So I want to know how fabulous your show did. You did end up doing your show, right?
I did. My very first performance of that show was in hospice at my mother's bedside just a few days before she passed away.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm sorry, I get
I know.
emotional. And
You're making me cry.
um, And she was at that point, she couldn't speak, but I could, she like I could see her like nodding her head and smiling occasionally, and it was my first performance of the show. Was I was still reading from the script, and I made a million mistakes, but that will be the most meaningful performance I've ever done in my
Right.
life. I don't expect to top that one. But after that, I started doing shows. Well, I did some shows in some theaters here in the Seattle area, and I started doing smaller shows for like I did a show for a group of hospice nurses, and then various groups would bring me to different places to do shows. I did shows in Philadelphia and uh, um, in Florida and Los Angeles and Chicago, and twice in London. Um, and frequently in connection with like fundraisers for cancer organizations. As occasionally I've done shows for conferences, oncology conferences, and genetic counselor conferences. Um, and the shows were always, like I talked earlier about connection, and they were really rewarding in terms of connecting with other people. And some of them were, at the beginning of the journey that I had already, gotten through. So gave them a point of hopefulness looking forward, or a way to find something to the idea that there might be something to look forward to.
Yeah,
um
you represented hope for them. You represented, she did this, I can do this too. I mean, that's you're just an inspiring person. And I think that's what I have learned in the big scheme of things is the more that we give and help others, the more it actually heals us, the better we feel when we are doing that. And have you found that doing these shows and oh, being able to
yeah, well, yeah, that would, I mean, that's one of the reasons why, if all you can do is join a support group, like a lot of people hesitate to join a support group because they feel like they're whining, or they're asking for help, or they're not used to asking for support. But if you join a support group, what you'll find is that you spend a lot of time giving support. Even when you're in the midst of this, there's somebody who you have something that helpful you can say something to. And if you if the only thing you do in a support group is offer support to other people who are going on the same road that you're on, you're going to help yourself so much, because it just makes you feel better.
Yeah, I agree. It always feels good because we're not here to be solo, creatures on this planet. We're here to have relationships and be there for one another. And I think it emulates when you have something that comes up that's traumatic or difficult to be able to sit with someone else who's also going through that. And now you feel like, okay, I'm not alone. We can do this together, no matter how different your situation is. You just feel more supported. It's almost like when you get a diagnosis after something you've had for 20 years, and you get this diagnosis, and then you see, oh, well, there's other people that have this too. Now I feel um and this might be the wrong way to put it, but there's a sense of belonging where kind of like what you said, where you said I thought being a mutant was a curse. Sometimes you feel like you're so isolated and alone in something, and then you listen to a podcast or you listen to your show and your music, and it's like, oh, okay, now I belong. Now I belong, and I can deal with this now, right?
Yeah. And I've continued to, and it raised interesting questions for me going through these physical changes, and it's sort of changing my trajectory. Uh, uh, and I ended up, I mean, I did the show for a number of years, and I don't do the show live anymore, but it is streaming on Amazon. Mutant Diaries, Unzipping My Jeans. So that was my LA show. We filmed that, And but then I went on and I wrote another play called First You Jump. And it wasn't autobiographical, but it was five stories about people facing moments in their life where they had to make a life-changing decision. And not only did they have no way of knowing it was the right decision, but once they made that leap, they would have no way of knowing if it had been the right decision.
No
Because
turning, no turning.
once you can't turn back. Once I had my mastectomies, for the rest of my life, I will never know if I had it needlessly or not.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you deal with that? How do you accept that? And is that something that is common to think about in that case? I mean, or is it just like a relief, like I never have to worry about it again, or is it take a minute to get there?
Um, it depends on the person. I'm not a person who spends a lot of who focuses on regret. Um, it's just the way I'm made. That once something is done, I might stress myself out, worrying about something in advance. But once it's done, once the bar comes down on the roller coaster, I'm on for the ride, and then so be it.
I love that. I love it. And that's such a healthy way of living life. That's mindfulness because, we can pull back a little bit on worrying about the future, but like you said, once it's done, there's no use holding on to that. And I love the first you jump because sometimes you just have to take the leap, and that they call it a leap of faith for a reason. It's believing something you cannot see. And it is just, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I know that this is what feels good for me right now. And I
Yeah, and then
love that.
you just deal with what happens afterwards. So then, after that, um, one of the stories in that play was about Pinocchio at midlife. It was called Geppetto's Funeral, and it was about Pinocchio, sort of after Geppetto's funeral, and he's middle aged and kind of looking back at his life and wondering, when he's feeling regret, a certain amount of regret that he accepted the gift of being human when he might have had it, and wondering what his life would have been like if he'd stayed a puppet.
Wow.
And I started, that of all the stories in that play, that one, it just kept working on my head, and I kept thinking about Pinocchio. And I guess what struck me about him, and my connection to him, is that he went through a radical physical change. He was made of wood, and then poof, he's flesh and blood. He's got a completely different body. But how did he feel on the inside? How did that work out for him? Did he feel this disconnect, that this person that was still there inside his head was not being accurately represented on the outside? Did he feel, imposter syndrome? That he was, like, in some sense, wearing a human suit and pretending to be a real person when he wasn't really like other people? And I ended up writing an entire novel, which just came out in March, called Pinocchio's Guide to the End of the World. And it's doing pretty well. It's an adventure story. It's not just his, inner musings about whether he's happy being a human or not. But he's struggling to feel connected to other people because he feels inside that he's different. And I think a lot of people feel that way.
Oh, wow.
And
Yeah.
I felt a disconnect for quite a while after my surgeries. That, I mean, if you're looking on YouTube, I have breasts, but they're not the ones that I originally had. They're fake. um and I just coming to terms with a radical physical change. And there are people who have to deal with even more radical physical changes, people who've been in accidents or in war, and have to, reconcile the inside and the outside. And I
Wow.
think even people who haven't been through physical trauma still, deal with, you know, I'm old, but inside I'm still that 25-year-old. There's but no one can see that because I'm covered with wrinkles, and I think a lot of people deal with the disconnect that you feel from aging sometimes, that you inside you're still this vital, interested person, and but does the world see that? And in Pinocchio's case, his transformation was wished for, and mine certainly wasn't wished for. And most people's who go through sort of violent, traumatic physical changes is not what they wish for. But I don't know that we're necessarily really good at predicting what's going to make us happy in the future.
Right, right.
And there was I remember a study done where they interviewed people who had won the lottery and people who'd had become paraplegics. And a year after their events, they both groups had equal life satisfaction.
Wow. Wow. And that all
So
comes down to mindset and how you choose to see your circumstance, right?
yeah, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about resilience, and why did I do well, and why did somebody else, you know, um, find themselves unable to overcome the grief at the loss.
Yeah.
And the things I've read about resilience, that people who are naturally resilient, um, growing up, they had at least one person who believed in them.
Mm,
And
mm.
and I was really fortunate. I had a very supportive family growing up. And I know some people are from rougher circumstances, but to some extent, I think that there are conscious things that people can do to create resilience in small ways. And I don't want to be morbid and say um, that you need to be planning for disaster.
Right.
Um, but this is an example that I really like to talk about lately. Say you're walking down the hallway and you've got a cup of coffee in your hand, and someone walks by the other way and jostles your arm and the coffee spills. Okay. If I asked you, why did you spill your coffee? What would you say?
In my case, it would probably be because I wasn't paying attention to where I was going.
Okay, well, try this on for size. I might say the reason I spilled my coffee was because that was what was in my cup. If I'd had tea in my cup, I would have spilled tea. If I had wine in my cup, I would have spilled wine. And um, the lesson there for resilience is that life is going to jostle your arm in little ways and big ways. You can't, no one escapes being jostled by life. And you can practice how you respond to the little things, the little annoyances. If you are, um, getting to this stage of life like me, where sometimes you just can't think of the word you need.
Yeah.
Do you respond with anger and frustration or worry, or do you laugh it off? And how easily do you accept help from other people? Practicing accepting help from others is a really good skill for resilience. A lot of people have a very hard time with that.
Yeah.
But there may come a time in your life when you really need the help of others. And if you can accept it graciously, then everyone will be happy. And what I learned when I was recovering from my surgeries was that people helping, whether I needed them to or not, was a gift to them too, because they would, come and visit or drop off a meal or something. And my husband is a fine cook. He didn't need people to bring us meals, but it made them feel great. And
Yeah.
so I said, just
I've used that.
let
I've
them bring
used
the lasagna.
exactly. I have used that so many times in my coaching. And I always say, at Christmas, someone hands you a gift, you don't hand it back and say, oh, no, no, I'm not deserving of that. When they took the time to buy it and wrap it and think of you, you take that gift and you're doing
And you
a
say thank
service
you.
to them. Yeah. Because we all know that helping others makes us feel good. Doing service fulfills us. So you're really
Hmm.
giving someone that gift of being able to serve and feel good about something that they are doing. And I love that you said that. That's the best way to end this is we spilled the tea.
Well,
And
if you think, if you're mindful about what you're filling your cup with, that's what's going to spill out when your arm gets jostled.
That's correct. And as a mental health provider, life coach, there also tells you your perspective of the world. Well, I spilled my coffee because that person did it to me. He ran into me. It's his fault. So then we can work on blaming. And what I said was, I was probably not paying attention. So
So
I
you're
in
self-blaming.
I do. I'm an internalizer. Like I probably did it, but I do it in a humorous way, and I love myself, and I know I have value and worth. Um, but I also am really big on accountability, and so that you can tell that's my personality. So it's really perspective, and what you said. Whatever's in your cup is going to spill out, and that's mindfulness, right in the middle, where it says I accept whatever is going to happen. Pain is inevitable. Our reaction is a choice. So I love it. I love this conversation. I love your humor. I love everything you bring to the table. And we're so happy you are here and you said ta-ta to the tatas because you're blessing us on this planet with your light continually. And we want you here for many, many years. So tell us how our listeners can get your book. They can stream your, which I can't wait to watch, the Mutant Diaries, Unzipping My Jeans. So tell us where to find you, websites, all that fun stuff.
Okay, well, my website is evamoon.net.
Okay.
And my book, Pinocchio's Guide to the End of the World, it's on all the major retailers, but Amazon primarily. Um, but you can order it from any bookstore or request it at your library as well.
Wow.
And Unzipping My Jeans is streaming on Amazon. If you search Eva Moon Unzipping My Jeans, it should come right up. You can watch it for,
Awesome.
I think, $2.99.
What do you have in the works for us coming up? Besides, well, your book, I mean, that just came out. So that's a big deal right now. We'll get some reviews and get some readers on that. Anything after that's on the horizon for you?
Oh, I've started working on another novel. I'm not sure. I'm such a social person, and writing is so solitary. It's hard for me to get into it. But I've got some ideas about a theatrical project that I'd like to do that will give a platform to a lot of other people. I think it's going to be a collaborative. And I don't want to say too much about it yet because it's in the very proto stages.
Yeah.
And then I do community work. Lead sing-alongs for my city every month. Then I lead ukulele groups where we just gather in a park every Sunday and play favorite songs for an hour and a half. And I just anything that brings people together to do something positive and uplifting and fun. I'm
Oh,
all there.
I love that. I'm more introverted, but I would go to a ukulele fest in the park with you. That's the one thing that I think could get and actually get me out of the house. So I just love it. I love everything about you. Thank you again for being a guest. Listeners, if you want to get a hold of Eva, it's evamoon.net. And don't forget to look her up on Amazon. And I'll have all of that information in the links in the show notes when we publish. Thank you again for the gift of your time. That is priceless and you will
Oh,
never get back. So thank you for that.
thank you for having me on, Maureen. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Listeners, thank you again for listening. As every week, I can never express my gratitude more. Um, that was a double negative. I should say I cannot, I can, I'd like to express my gratitude for you and for being here and for spreading the word, for sharing this, building the community. And as you can see, every single week we have different topics, and someone out there needs to hear this, and we're here for you. So if you have any comments, you want to get a hold of Eva, you can always come through me as well. You all know that I offer life coaching, relationship coaching, dating coaching, confidence coaching, trauma coaching, autism coaching, all the stuff, all the coaching, life coach Maureen. And also, don't forget my books on Amazon. My dog is my relationship coach, and my dog is more enlightened than I am. And don't forget to go to the boutique for your furry babies, all the healthy treats and fun gifts that they deserve. My dog is everything. Net. Until next week, my friends, please stay cool out there, or try to be as cool as Eva Moon if you can. Love you all with gratitude. Please take care of yourself, take care of each other, and most of all, take care of those furry babies, and adopt, don't shop. We'll talk to you next week, everyone. Bye.